Hello, and welcome to the Quality Hub, Chatting with ISO Experts. I'm your host, Xavier Francis, and today we're going to be discussing management review. We'll be hearing from numerous past guests, including Joe Hill, Brian Smith, and Suzanne Strasser. Now, let's get started with Joe Hill as we discuss what is the purpose of management review.
Well, personally, I've always considered management review to be one of the most critical and important elements of the management system. It's really the opportunity for the management team or the management rep or the process owners to report on the performance of their processes and the overall system, provide data which may support acquiring additional resources, etc. And then for top management, it's that opportunity to really review if their investment in the management system appears to be aligned with and appropriately supporting their strategic direction of the organization and the overall business goals.
So you're sort of getting a picture of the entire business from a quality management standpoint and any needs you might have in different sections of the business that are from the process owners of those things?
Exactly.
That's good to know. So that's leadership. How do you ensure that the management review process involves all the relative stakeholders?
The meeting is typically facilitated by the person with the overall responsibility for the management system, attended by top management, and others may need to be included to discuss particular issues where more detail is required.
Should all the relative stakeholders be present for a meeting?
You know, there've been some questions related to whether all of those relevant stakeholders need to be present. And generally speaking, it's a best practice and my personal recommendation. But you may be surprised to hear that a formal meeting is technically not a requirement.
That's interesting. So they don't say to have a management review meeting. They say have management review.
Exactly. And the word meeting does not appear in the standard under the management review clause. However, the standard also requires that there be a record of these reviews. So when you read it all and put it all together, a formal meeting with documented minutes is really the best way to address those requirements.
So we're not saying it has to be a meeting, but it should be a meeting.
Exactly. Exactly.
We're not saying it's aliens, but it's aliens. Yeah, right. You know. I mean, I guess there are other ways you could review it if you had to. Probably getting everybody in one room or on one Zoom meeting or a combination of the two,
right,
is the best way to do it because you're all going to be there and present and being able to have real time back and forth.
Right. And in that perfect world, all relevant stakeholders would be available for a meeting. But if there are people who cannot be present, you just want to make sure that you're able to share the minutes and any of the information that was presented with them, get their feedback and their input to include in the minutes.
Brian, as someone who's been a little more hands-on in regards to management review and kind of been on both sides of it, if you will, what's your take on management review?
Sure. Management review, as it's defined in the ISO standard, is a structured, planned review that has required inputs and output.
In this meeting, it's going to have minutes. It's not going to be your daily review. Hey, let's sit down with management and talk. And in this meeting, you're going to discuss important issues that are not urgent.
You know, that not urgent thing is kind of critical because, you know, if there's an urgent need for your department, your process, or your business, you're going to bring that up. That's one of those daily or weekly meetings.
Absolutely. I mean, in the moment, hey, we need to take care of this problem right now. This is where you're looking at higher level organizational structure and things that you're going to implement.
Yeah, this is important but not urgent. And I'll give you an example. You know, if I need a new extension cord back in my department, I'm going to say something to, you know, management and say, I need that. This is more advising or informing top management of things that are going on down on the ground, like we need to start thinking about replacing that air compressor.
Right.
In a large factory, that's a big deal. That's capital planning.
So in some internal factors, hey, Jim's 68, he's looking to retire. He's the only one that knows how to handle this piece of equipment. That's the type of stuff that we're talking about in this management review.
Exactly. When you come to management review, you want to be prepared for it. Mm-hmm. You know, if you're going to talk about requesting capital expenditures, you're going to want data, you're going to want some quotes and things like that. That's what management review is really intended for. It's the things that you don't talk about on a daily or weekly basis. And it can be to inform top management of things that are going on, I do a management review for my department consulting here for the president, Scott. He's not a micromanager. He lets me run my program, but quarterly I put together a structured meeting to inform him and get his counsel and feedback. It can also really work out well because now all your other process owners or other accountable people are in that meeting and you can get counsel. It's like, hey, has anybody ever dealt with this, anything like this before? I'm struggling with it. You have everybody in a structured meeting. Or, if you're looking at making some planned changes, which is a good idea to plan your changes, you may find out in that meeting that there's some risks to another area of the operation that you didn't realize. We're using data, we're using a structured system to determine what actions to take or not take.
Right.
And that's one of the really critical parts of management review is there's required inputs in the standard that you must have in your meeting. The results of audits is one of them. Turning the inputs into outputs is the key. So what improvements do we want to put forward, or what actions do we need to take? And then it's very critical that those outputs are the first input to your next management review meeting. We don't do things for auditors here generally, but I guarantee you that's one of the first places they're going to look.
So, Suze, we're talking about management review, but how can we integrate that into what we may already be doing with meetings and as a business as a whole?
Well, where people struggle a bit is doing this with management review inputs and outputs, because there's a fair amount. The requirements say that you have to cover things like your previous action items, changes in internal and external issues, the effectiveness of your processes, and then a bunch of trends like customer satisfaction, your quality objectives, nonconformities and corrective actions. There's a whole laundry list, right?
That's a lot. You may or may not have already been looking at some of this stuff, but you need to do it a little bit more formally and show what you're going to address and how you're going to address it, right?
Yes, and there are some things that companies automatically look at, like resource needs. Of course, you're going to do that. How your suppliers are doing. So those things are already part of your normal fabric.
Right. It's almost like you're taking a more proactive approach. So you're looking for opportunities for improvement. You're looking for things that you can change that are going to make things better, not, we need to react to make something better because of a risk.
Right. And I've always said management review in general is a step back from the day-to-day. So you're not in the weeds. You're at a higher level looking at how effective your processes are and how effective your management team is. So doing that in a normal daily meeting sometimes is a challenge.
Some things you have to gather. You have to gather the metrics to be able to look at it as a group. So that might be something that you have been doing at a bigger meeting, or maybe you haven't. So now maybe you need to do an add-in meeting from a management review standpoint and saying, okay, we're going to look at these trends, this data that we weren't looking at before.
Right.
Or maybe you incorporate in something you're already doing and then start saying, let's add a few points to that. So we're looking at the risks and opportunities and other things that the standard requires.
Yeah, you want to take advantage of the system that you've put in place.
Yeah,
I mean, goodness, you've spent a time and money on this. So you can't just cast it aside or pull it out, once a year before the audit.
Right.
You should really incorporate it into your operations.
Right.
That's
That's
the point.
what's going to help you drive continual improvement.
Yes.
That makes sense. Well, there is a lot of things like we just said that you kind of have to look at from a management review. How do you do it without just, okay, we have our 6-month management review meeting. Oh, we have our 4-month management review meeting. Oh, like you just said, we're audited in a month and a half. We should probably look at this stuff. How can you really do it without those separate meetings?
Well, to me, there are, I think, 3 ways to do it apart from having a standalone meeting. The first would be that in the course of your normal management meetings, like I said before, you certainly are talking about resources, improvements, metrics, customers, so on. So you could document those meetings that you already have and then develop a crosswalk to show when and where you've covered the topics that you're required to. Of course, you'd have to ensure that you covered all the requirements at the end of whatever cycle you've defined. So every quarter,
almost look at what you do in your meetings now and
yes.
check off, okay, yeah, this is covered in this. Oh, we haven't done this yet. We need to add that.
It's a little dicey when you try to pull it together for an audit. I will say I have done it that way. So an easier approach would be to have the management review agenda handy. And then when you talk about these topics, just fill in your minutes.
Okay.
And then at the end of the cycle, you could see what hasn't been covered and then, pull the gang together to fill in the blanks.
Right. So you're just touching on the few things that you haven't already.
Yeah. And then a third option would be to use your management review agenda as the basis for standing meetings going forward, and then add in any other topics that come up. I like this approach a lot because I found that most items fit in the agenda, and it's a way to make the QMS the centerpiece rather than a separate thing. You get into a rhythm, and you actually consider using other aspects of your QMS.
Well, that makes sense because you're trying to communicate it and you're incorporating something new. If you're going to focus on that, that's going to help you gain the benefits of doing it. So why not make it the centerpiece?
Right. And for example, you might be talking about a repetitive issue. And if you have the agenda in front of you, you may say, hey, wait a minute, this might warrant a corrective action, and make it more embedded into your current discussions.
Sometimes you're just having a meeting, you're like, hey, here's a problem. Okay. We know there's a problem. The standard says you need to take some step to correct that.
Yes.
And look at it to fix the problem, not just know it's there. I see this is really a combination of taking advantage of what you're already doing, adding some points that you need to discuss. It's probably more manageable.
It is.
Now, Joe, how does management review and looking at KPIs and other data lead to opportunities to improve in your business?
Yeah, the inputs that the standard has built in that are required to be part of management review, they're really built to try and spur that discussion, around key areas of a successful management system. And so those discussions themselves should generate potential areas for improvement, which can then be documented as formal action items. I mean, really, the ultimate key is to keep these meetings and the information presented interesting for the intended audience. Again, it's for top management.
Right. So you don't want just them to start glazing over.
Exactly. So the data, you always want to try to keep it focused and concise and present it in a manner to which top management can relate. And if you can communicate these inputs in a way that really demonstrates how they have an impact on the bottom line, of course, top management will generally be more engaged in that discussion and offer more suggestions for improvement.
So you don't just want to come to them with a list of needs.
No, exactly.
if you're somebody who's going to present at this at one of these, like, hey, I need this, this, and this. Okay, why? Or you don't want to bore them with data to the point of like their eyes are glazing over. You have to be pretty short and concise, not too elaborate.
Exactly, and as we said earlier on in the discussion, this is really the opportunity for the quality manager and the process owners. If they're struggling in a certain area, this is their opportunity to present that data, to top management, to again try to get those discussions for additional resources or changes that can really benefit the management system itself.
We want to thank everyone for tuning into the Quality Hub this week, and we hope that you all have a safe and wonderful holiday season. We also hope that you'll stay tuned for 2025 as we continue our journey and discussions on ISO standards and other aspects that pertain to your business. Now, if you're looking for more information about core business solutions and how it can help you with ISO certifications, cybersecurity, customized training, or anything else, please email us at info@thecoresolution.com. You can also visit our website at www.thecoresolution.com. And remember, if you haven't already followed us on your favorite podcast platform or YouTube, be sure to do so, and that way you won't miss the next Quality Hub podcast when it's released next week. Have a great day, everyone.